this is fun. I see lots of familiar names on here. This is how fun this is. Great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm looking at who is the leader here. Number 6. Must be those daisies.
There's a couple of number 4s I see.
Yep. Number 5.
I think it's interesting that women are all choosing hearts.
They're just a little easier to see. I direct that's in the directions, because the heart, if you use the X's or some of those other, they're a little harder to see against the background. So the heart's a big thing.
Okay. Alrighty. In a minute, I'm going to post a poll for folks, and we'd love for you to jump into it throughout the meeting. We'll be talking about soil health in a narrative context. And so this poll lets us know a little more about where you're from, your experience with soil health, and we really appreciate you showing up to let us know your story. So I'm going to launch the poll right now.
And I'll stop sharing so that we can move into our next part.
Okay. So the poll should be up. Can I just have a thumbs up from any audience community member that you can see the poll?
There's a few thumbs in the screen.
Piper, hey Piper, do you see the poll, Piper?
I do.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so welcome. I'm gonna put up an agenda for the rest of the session today, because I feel like agendas are lovely for us to know where we're going. And let me move this out of the way. We're going to shift into an introduction of our stellar panelists here today, and then we'll jump into a panel share where Theresa and Alicia and Annie will share their diverse soil health stories. And then we'll move into breakout rooms where we can all come together in those breakout rooms and chat about things that we're concerned about in terms of soil health with our own operations or work that we're doing, but also maybe things that we're inspired by and that we would like to try to implement perhaps this season. So the breakout rooms are there for us to brainstorm together and lean on each other in a networking and knowledge sharing sense. Then really importantly, when we come out for a large share, we'll be asking folks to let us know, what did you chat about in your breakout room, so that we can pull this information and help build more soil health listening sessions that are aimed towards your needs and the things that you're seeing and the things that you want to learn. And so with that, I will stop sharing and jump into introductions. And today we have with us for our panelists, Annie Warmke. Annie Warmke has a podcast, When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine. Annie has a book, The Business of Goat Herding, written with Carrie Starr. And Thanks for Nothing, a story of annually living without shopping during the winter months. And we just ask folks to mute themselves.
At me. That's your own.
Coming in. So Annie has been an amazing WFAN partner and has received awards such as the Lifetime Achievement Award for domesticshelters.org for women in social justice, the Rural Action Sustainable Living Award, the Giraffe Award for sticking your neck out for rural battered women, the J.C. Penney Award, the Melita Business Woman of the Year, YWCA, Women in Leadership, and Tampa Bay Up and Comer Award. Annie is a writer, farmer, business leader, activist, and perhaps best of all, a grandmother who has received the awards mentioned above for her work in sustainability and social justice. She manages Blue Rock Station's Warmke Farm, where she raises dairy goats, teaches cheese making, and is developing several island areas of a food forest. In April, she plans to create an urban food forest garden in Marietta, Ohio on a 30 by 70 lot. Along with Carrie Starr, Annie founded Women Grow Ohio and Buffalo Gals Voices to create networking opportunities. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat for a second there to make sure everyone can hear okay. To create networking opportunities and periodic classes and encampment weekends for women in agriculture. And we are so lucky to have Annie here today to share her soil health story. We are also joined by Theresa Eberhardt. Theresa is a mother of 3 adult children. Theresa is a landowner, raises chickens, is also a dietitian with the Women, Infants, and Children program and with St Croix hospice, as well as being a 4-H leader. Theresa loves to garden and walks along with learning about soil health. And we are in for a treat to hear Theresa's story about cover crops and owning land and tenant farmers. Theresa's focus is improving the ground that she owns to pass on to her children. And Theresa hopes to pass on a love for conservation and lifelong learning. So we are so lucky that Theresa is here today as well. And then we are super fortunate that Alicia Gasaway is here. Alicia lives in Monticello on a small farm and grows produce for friends and family. She cultivates a food forest, practices rotational grazing, and enjoys learning about energy healing, herbal medicine, and crafting her own tea blends, and is on the planning committee for the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, as well as being a full-time mom and building soil. So I am so eager to hear Alicia share her story of building soil, as well as building a family and children, which is no small task. And so what we'll do is I will share slides for you, Annie, in just a moment here, and we'll jump into panel shares. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And Annie, let me just pull these up for you.
Well, as you're doing that, I just want to say it's so great to be invited to participate, and I am such a big fan of WFAN ever since I learned about the work that women in agriculture are doing. So it's my honor to be here and share my story. So the first pictures, just to say a couple things about the picture. So this is the beginning of the food forest, which doesn't look like much, but that's all right. Forests start out slowly anyway. And let's see the next photo. So this is a part of a pasture that this is how goats should be living. You see just how wild it looks, and all the weeds and all the flower heads and everything. I'm going to talk more about that, but they're not eating on the ground, and that's where the problem lies with parasites and how they can really have contact if they're eating on a very low plant. And this is safety for goats. Let's see the next one. I wasn't sure the order, so
I can go forward back if you want.
All right, so this is not an example that I would want to have showing somebody how to do it, because that grass is way too low, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But basically, the parasite lives in that lower part of the grass, so you want to have it be higher, and that takes some doing, and that takes soil development. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Let's see the next slide.
Oh,
so let's stop.
No.
Let's stop there. So
okay.
This is one of the groups that saved my life. So anyway, so when I started my journey to being a serious farmer, I didn't realize that even though the goats ate the grass in the pasture, they could just be keeping that rumen, that stomach that needs to, that's the fermentation vat. They have 4 stomachs, and they have one that's fermenting the food, basically. That to keep that rumen working, they need something. And all I was giving them was that something. I wasn't giving them very many calories and almost no nutrition. And I didn't know that in the beginning. I don't know why it escaped me, but I didn't grow up with farmers, although I come from a long line of farmers, and I'd read a lot of books. I would say by the time I actually started goat herding, I'd read 20 or 30 books, and not a single one talked about soil testing or the way you should be using the pasture in terms of the height of the plants or rotation or anything like that. So eventually I had the field soil tested through the local extension service, and I didn't know that it didn't have all the mineral content in the testing. So I called up and I said, well, what should I do? And they said, you need to lime your field. That made no sense to me. It's like, well, if it was that simple, why did I have it tested? So about a decade ago, I bought a really young, seemingly healthy buck at an auction. And it turned out that he brought barber pole worm to my herd. And this is a deadly, deadly parasite. And it reproduces at an amazing rate, and it lives down in that lower part of the plant that would be in the pasture. So when the first goats died, I started using wormers. I'd never had to do that to try to control the parasite load. And I didn't find anything in books or online in those days that mentioned any other ways to rescue my herd from this deadly event. So some of the goats, and I do believe this, some goats do seem to naturally control parasite load. And because they reproduce, the barber pole particularly reproduces at a very fast rate, an amazing rate, really. There are still goats that can handle that, but there are many goats that are going to die. And so it started to make sense to me that I was that I had to figure out how to save my herd, but I was going about it all the wrong way. So I went to the veterinarian because I had a goat, my first goat kid that died. It was a horrible, horrible thing. And I went to the vet and I brought a fecal sample, a poop sample to get tested. And I was crying. I mean, I was really, really sad because it's not a fun thing to have a goat die. The death of the pain of it from barber pole is excruciating for the human and the animal. So the veterinarian's answer to what I said, what should I do? He said, I needed to kill all of my goats. He called it call the herd and burn my pastures. And I looked at him and I said, listen, Sonny, all you have to do is look at the microscope and tell me what's in there, because do I look like I want to hear that kind of crap today? Because I'm not that kind of farmer. So I was crying a lot. And then it dawned on me that I had met somebody from International Crop Services out of Michigan at a conference. And they said, oh, we don't think your soil, if you got it done through the extension service, we don't think your soil test is probably very accurate around minerals. And that's where all the health really happens. The minerals tweak the plants, the microbes, they help the microbes, which we're not going to go into why you can have healthy soil, but these are things that have to happen. And so I sent off my soil samples. And when it came back, it was very clear what the problems were. And they did tell me, Annie, you were pretty smart not to put lime on that field, because if you had done it, you would have locked up every plant and you would have actually had no nutrition in your pasture at all. So the other thing that was really, really low was selenium. And this is a really important mineral for, I'm not sure if it's for other ruminants, but definitely for goats. And if there is low or no selenium, you're going to see a goat aborting. You're going to see her having stillborn. She's going to have problem producing a lot of milk if she is a dairy goat. And she's not going to be able to pass the placenta. And these are really important bits. You're raising an animal and you want to have something to show for it. So the people at Crop Services listened to me on that first call when I was crying, and I mean literally crying as I described my situation. And they walked me through a process of soil testing accurately. And then they sent me on to Earth Foods, which I think is another slide that we have. To use items like blackstrap molasses and kelp and some other ingredients to encourage microbe development in my soil. And the microbes are what really is needed to create this healthy plant life. So I was starting to suspect that my hay, I mean, this sounds like a woman scorned in a way, but this is the way it is in agriculture for a lot of women. And that is that we don't have a voice. We are treated like we don't know anything. And frankly, when I think about what I was doing, I didn't know enough. So I admit that, but I was working with people who were taking advantage, and they really were ignorant too, because the hay man, I'll call him the hay man, he was a local farmer. And so I asked him, I said, what is the protein, the TDN, they call it, in the hay? And he said 17%. And I said, how can that be? And he said, no, it is. So as I went on and I realized the deficit in my fields and everything, I wanted to test the hay, and he was having none of it, even though I said I'd pay for it. So eventually I paid to have the hay tested. And when the test came back, it was almost totally no food value. So here I was paying a premium price for something that was just like they might as well have been chewing dirt. And so when I went to him and I showed him the results and I said, I think I can help you with this, he got really angry. And he said, well, I never had it tested because I was afraid it was lower than it is. And then he wanted to confront me about gun control. And he was going to have me for lunch that day over me just saying, hey, the hay tested badly and what can we do about it? I was willing to try to figure it out. So I had to find a new hay person. And the other thing that I realized, I had to start rotating pasture. I mean, really seriously, not the way I was doing it. And so I started keeping a document that I write on, and I made a lot smaller paddocks. And so they were only on the paddock 2 or 3 days. And I was able to really get a big gain on the barber pole, and I didn't lose any animals that year. The thing about rotating pastures is you really want to give that plant, it's not just about the goat or the cow or the whatever you're rotating. It is about that plant recovery. And so you want to make sure that you're not going to any lower than 6 inches of plant, because that plant's recovery is going to take a lot longer, and it might not even recover if you're late enough in the season. So some of my pasture expansion in the past 2 years has included some of my forest land, and that has been a game changer. So, and at this point, we're in the process of creating a number of food forest islands on the 38 acres that we have, and we're going to expand how we rotate goats this year and just experiment. So we're going to keep all of our bucklings that were born this year. We're going to weather them. We're going to castrate them, and then they're going to be passed around with electric netting fence. They start out in what we call kindergarten to learn the fence, learn to come to the bell. And once they pass kindergarten, they'll be going into specific areas in the forest, and they'll be dealing with the invasives that we need to remove in order to expand the food forest garden. This is, some of this is stuff that's happened, but it's not thought of as a mainstream solution, especially with foresters. But there are lots of studies that show that if we utilize the forest and we don't overgraze just like it, or over forage, like the same with pasture, that we're going to see that it's okay. So goats spend a lot of daylight hours, specifically in certain areas, and then they'll come back to the barnyard at night. So that way I can rest my pastures this year, and maybe, just maybe, I can completely eradicate barber pole. So I encourage you to follow up. I don't know if we've looked at all the slides that I had, because we have some adorable kids. I mean, are there kids that aren't adorable? So and just to say that there are solutions out there, and you really should, a lot of us have an intuitiveness about what's needed. And so don't let somebody just tell you that's the fact. Research and find out what really is the truth, and participate maybe in the HOP program from WFAN this summer. because if you would like to have some mentoring, they've got a great program, and I hope to see you there.
Annie, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? I see one from Nan right now in the chat box. Where is Annie farming? Where are you farming, Annie?
So any place I can, but my farm is in Southeast Ohio, outside of Philo, Philo, Ohio. And I did I don't know if the slide is up there with my website and phone number address, but I also want to say that if you're near or in Ohio, we are having a WFAN sponsored dinner for women in agriculture on March the 30th. And we're having Goat College on the 29th, which Stephanie Enlow from WFAN is going to be there. And, you know, the goal is to get women together to learn about how they can network and about funding. And also I've been working with a woman in Ukraine, She Farms. I've helped her set up an organization for women in agriculture there, because as we all know, they're at war and women have really suffered in agriculture.
Any other questions for Annie? And I'll be sharing a contact slide at the end so folks can scoop websites and email addresses for our panelists for any follow-up questions that you have.
Yeah, and people shouldn't hesitate. If you do have a question or you just want to network about something, don't hesitate to be in touch.
All right.
I had some questions about your management, Annie. Sorry, I have to turn on my video. Hi, Annie. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Nan or Nanny, either way. And I also have small ruminants. I no longer have goats because they're like fencing water, and if you ask me. But anyway, that's beside the point. So do you aggressively rotate like every day?
No, it depends on the height of the plant, and the size of the paddock. And so you just got to pay attention. But somewhere between 3 days and 4 days, and sometimes 2 days, depending on the size.
I guess I'm just wondering if you've tried other eradications other than, I mean, you're talking about just resting for a year.
I have tried everything, and barber pole is just lethal. So
oh, it sure is. And I think you have more of a problem with it in Ohio because you don't have winters as we do here in Maine.
well, yeah, we do have winter, but it's this year we haven't had hardly any. But it isn't just that, it's wet, and then when it gets really dry, that's great. One of my solutions that's helped me a lot is at the end of August, everybody has to stay in. They don't go to pasture because it's hot and dry, and so it's just really, it's a frustrating thing. I haven't had anybody die recently, so my grandma would say, knock on wood, but we're still fighting it, and I know it's there. So, but resting the pasture, if they have no food, then the parasite has no food, but they're really cagey. You know, when it starts to get cold, they actually form an encasement of themselves in the body of the goat so they can overwinter.
Oh,
And then they
I'm
break
well
out.
aware that, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they
Oh, it's so sad.
right out in the stomach lining. I know. And I'm not sure 1 year is going to break your cycle either, but that's.
Well, then we'll go 2 years because I have plenty of forest land. I don't know how much energy my interns and I are going to have for moving net fencing and bringing everybody back at night, but I'm pretty determined. And I need the invasives taken care of. So we'll see.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Can I ask what soil test do you use that was better than the garden variety of soil test?
I use the one that the Crop Services International has, and they do the testing themselves.
Thank you.
And they're so great. You can call up. It doesn't cost any extra. They'll walk you through everything. They would tell me things like, okay, I know that was recommended by Earth Foods, but they're just trying to sell you product, and they own part of Earth Foods. Don't do it that way. Let's do it this way. And they've been there when I needed it, and I called back and soil test.
Thank you.
So they're are sweet and wonderful and
Okay. And then we just had one more question, Annie. Ursula's asking if you had tried browsing them.
if I tried what?
Brushing/browsing.
I can ask that question. So, have you tried having your goats browse rather than graze? Because goats are browsers, not grazers. So have you tried them as browsers?
Not sure what you're referring to. I mean, I
So,
know they're browsers,
so,
but I don't know what you're.
Right. So goats, unlike cow and sheep, are browsers. Cows and sheep are grazers, which means they're grass feeders. And goats are mountain animals that were historically ate bushes and herbaceous woody plants. And so I think maybe some of your parasitic issues have to do with the fact that they're grazing, because they're not used to eating food that is grown directly out of the soil. They typically eat leaves of brushy plants and herbaceous plants and woody plants. So farmers have always used them to keep fence lines clear or to eradicate bushes that were encroaching on farmland. And I was wondering if you have enough, like someone mentioned bush honeysuckle. And the reason they love it is because all goats are from either Asia, the Asian Alps, or from the European Alps. And so I was wondering if you've tried converting them to be browsers for their nutritional intake rather than grazers.
I think that was the intent of her early slides. It sounds like she's kind of lost connection. So I'll just answer what I think she was doing in her presentation. In the beginning, she was actually showing people that they do better as browsers on higher feed, on flowering anyway. And then she sort of showed photos of grazing low grass, explaining that was a no-no for all the reasons you're saying. So I think, yes, I think we've lost her, and I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah. So she does mostly browse them now?
And that's what she's wanting. Her strategy, as I understand it, is to move them into more of a forested, to do forest.
Right.
grazing.
Oh,
So,
good. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I did sign on like 7 minutes late, so perhaps I
Okay.
missed that. But
Whatever.
I raised goats for a long time, and they don't get a full diet at all, either with hay or with grass. They're not.
And that's what she was
yeah.
saying, was that when she first started, she just didn't know why. She just hadn't gotten that memo, but anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
good.
I'm gonna
glad.
Thank you. We're going to go on.
I'm gonna
Mhm.
shift us to our next panelist and encourage folks in breakout rooms to continue any soil and small ruminant livestock conversations for sure. Thank you everyone for engagement. We're going to transition to Theresa, and Theresa has a wonderful presentation along with her story share. And so Theresa, the stage is yours.
Okay, and Amy, is the slide showing for you?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Wasn't sure if that was gonna go. So I'm Theresa Eberhardt, and I own land in Northeast Iowa. And Amy had kind of in the intro said a lot of what I do, and I have it listed here as well. And I've been involved with things with women landowners, WFAN, for 2 or 3 years now. And just kind of started with a first meeting because I felt like I needed to learn more, and I did, and I am still learning more. Like Amy said, this is my why. So my middle child, my second daughter, got married this fall. It was a beautiful day. In Iowa, we had 40-degree weather and snow on the Tuesday and Wednesday before the Saturday wedding. And everything was outdoors. So this mother was a little bit freaking out, but we had a beautiful day that day, and things. But like Amy said, you know, my whole intent is to leave the soil in at least as good or better, hopefully, condition than when we started working with things for my children. So and their prospective spouses and families as we move on in life. I don't have the grandma title yet, but who knows, maybe someday. And things. So this was my problem in a particular field, and was really a good eye opener for me. It's important to put your boots on the ground and walk through the field, and or get through a field with a side-by-side or a four-wheeler or whatever your intent is, because from the road, I will tell you that this didn't look that bad. And really it was probably a good foot or so as far as erosion and where soil had been taken away. And of course, our soil is it's everything. And so forth. But this is just a little further away picture, and you can see on the top kind of how things were coming down. And I maybe should have had this picture first, because if you look at this again, it doesn't seem like it's quite so bad. The problem here is that the water, as it was coming down the field, should have filtered through this middle area, grass waterway, but it was going around it. And so the waterway was no longer functional in the way that it had intended to be, or was supposed to be. Definitely some factors as far as the erosion in this field were some mismanagement, and just the natural topography. This is a very hilly field, just like most of my land is. And of course, the unusual weather events that we've been having the past few years, when we don't get those gentle rains. It comes in a short amount of time and comes down hard and so forth. So all of those are things. So we looked at the different equipment and the planting direction in that particular field, as far as some of the correction in this field. And we did redo the waterways and some of the work that I did in the field. You know, I talked with the NRCS office and FSA, developed a plan. I have an excavating crew that I've been working with, and we talk through things. And I think that that's one of the main things that I really want to emphasize too. It's really important to have that communication with whoever you're working with, whether it's your tenant or some of the other people that are helping you in all of the things that you're doing. And I know we already talked about walking the field. Don't take what it looks like from the road or from a distance. I know in different sessions, there's women that are riding in the tractor, and I think that that's an amazing thing. It doesn't always work out with my work schedule to do those things, but if you can, you know, just seeing it from a different angle. So this just kind of shows the hills and slopes of my farm. You can see it's not flat. I know there's parts of Iowa even that are flat, and we have people from across the nation. And so part of what I want to emphasize too is that there is not one cure-all for every field or every farm. You need to look at the topography, the type of soil, the things that you're planting. So this also does show my cover crop. So my cereal rye that we do have on that particular field, and all of my fields, we do have cover crop going in. In the past, it has just been cereal rye. Starting this year, it's going to be a mix. I don't know exactly if it's going to have radishes in or exactly what that mix will be, but it will have more than one cover crop, which I'm not a biologist, but what I do know is that the cover crops, do just help with the microbes in the ground. And so some of what Annie shared, we need that healthy soil. And so the best way for me to think about it is just like we have bacteria and different different organisms in our whole gut system that help to absorb nutrients and digest food, the soil needs that too. So the things that we're putting there help the soil to be nourished, just like us eating food helps nourish our body. So I'm sure my background is kind of where I pull that from, but that's how it works best for me to look at those things. So of course, part of my story is that I'm a widow of 7 years now. And when we were married, my husband did most of the outside work. I, of course, helped. The worst part was pulling him out of when he's stuck. That I think is the worst job in the world. But anyway, so when he passed away and I needed to start taking much more responsibility and taking charge of the things that were happening, it took me some time, but one of the first times that I needed to go into the FSA office and sign some paperwork, I felt very much like a fish out of water and very overwhelmed. And the person was explaining things to me, and she wasn't doing it in a bad way at all. I'm sure my mindset wasn't quite ready for what she was trying to share with me. But I do recall saying, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to stop and slow down, and you're going to have to pretend I am dumb because I am. And that is exactly how I felt. Somebody that I do know that works in that office, when the lady that was helping me stepped away to get some copies of things, she stepped over and said, "You're not dumb, you'll get this." And those were some of the best words that I probably heard, because it did make me feel like I could take on this challenge. Because she said there's some husband-wife teams that the wife is the one that comes in and does all the paperwork and knows all those things. And so if the husband came in, he'd be as lost as I was. So those were good, encouraging words for me. And even though I didn't know it then, and I know it now, it was really the start of me building a team to manage my ground and what we have, what I have on this slide. And so that whole team that you develop may be different than what it looks like, what my slide looks like. So, for me, I've had the opportunity to do some things through WFAN and learn, become more confident. Unfortunately, every aspect of our life, whether it's education or farming or healthcare, has its own jargon. And so when you attend classes, whether it's through WFAN or I know our FSA office has done a few things, it gives you that opportunity to learn that jargon, to learn some of the terminology, and just give you the confidence to be able to ask questions. And again, I know now that some of those first days, I didn't feel like I knew enough to know what to even ask. And so that's where you have to get, and I think Annie had alluded to that too. It's hard to know what to ask when you don't know. So I'm also fortunate enough, I have two brothers that are involved in the farming industry and a brother-in-law, and they would field my questions. Generally, they would also say, but this is our land, and we know yours is hilly, and they know it's different, and so forth. And they also knew that I was asking them for an opinion, but it was still my decision. And they were supportive of that, which is good. And I know not everybody has those things, but I was glad that I had the family. And my tenants are good. Definitely, we go through different struggles, just like any relationship. And initially, I have two different tenants, and initially the one tenant, I think we struggled a little more just because the way that I learn is by asking questions. And he felt I was questioning him or questioning what he was doing. And that was not my intent, but it's always good for us to take a step back on how we're wording things and what we're saying and so forth. And so we've made that through. And so, and initially in the area that I was showing, I had wanted the cover crops, and I was just feeling like we have to figure out what to do with this land, because just 4 years prior, we had done some work on that land, and it's not feasible to put in waterways every 4 years or to redo all of those things. And so I knew we needed to make some big changes. And so I did tell him that initially I would pay for the cover crop that first year, and things. And we kind of had developed a plan that he would pay for part and continually to start paying for a little more. We didn't get very far, and he pays for all of the cover crop, I think in part understood and is seeing the benefits of it. But also in Iowa, they do get a break on their crop insurance. So that is a nice benefit and things, but so it's nice to have it there. It's in the contracts now. And it's nice. So, and Iowa State Extension Office, other similar organizations have had great resources and educational things as well that I've attended. And again, just gives you another leg to stand on, and more information. So we've kind of talked about the things I did, the cover crops, no-till, the waterways that we did put in this field this last time then were CRP waterways, and just some reshaping of areas and so forth. So I did use, the first time that we worked in that field, I had used a different excavating company, but who I'm working with now things seem to be going well. So that's good. And then I just have a few more pictures of the cereal rye growth in the spring and the fall. And so when we get this fall, I'll have to remember to take pictures. That's what I'm not always as good about. But taking pictures of what the growth looks like when we have a couple different species mixed in. So, and then I just left a slide if there was any questions or anything, and we'll see what we can do.
So much, Theresa. Does anyone have any questions for Theresa? We can drop them in the chat box or just unmute. And
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you, Theresa, can you say what you used in your cover crop mix?
Right now, it's just cereal rye is all I have used. I believe we're going to try some radishes, but I'm not 100% certain what we're going to add to the cereal rye this year. So, I didn't have it as part of this slide, and we're very early in very early stages, but I had found someone that is close to my area that is looking at some other small grain things and trying to find that outlet. And that's something else that I'm very interested in doing, and getting more than a soybean corn rotation. So, but that's a futuristic thing. It takes some time, some learning for both of us and comfort level. and so forth. But yeah, I I think it will probably be some radishes, but I don't know that for sure.
Thank you.
But it's interesting how all the different, each cover crop has a little different purpose too, and so forth. So we were able to get through a program called Equip, a 5-year plan. And so I need to check too, because it would be nice to that second thing or second and third thing that we add. Maybe we do radishes this year and try something else the next year, just to kind of see what else we can add into the soil and so forth. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Barbara mentioned that your cover crops look great, and they do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome.
I don't know why I'm having a hard time raising my hand here, but I have a question. If you're ready for me to ask.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering, and I sorry, I missed the part of the presentation because I do grazers. So, but do you ever use this for I assume you're using it as sort of a nurse crop. Do you graze off any of it, or do you use it for a plow down? Or is there any additional use other than just winter cover? Does it winter kill?
It does not winter kill. Cereal rye does not winter kill. Whereas I know like the radishes or some of the other ones will. For me at this time, it is just a cover crop. It's not grown for anything else.
Well, what do you mean?
There is one in a neighboring county that does something called relay farming, and it is different than cover crop, and I want to learn more. Again, that's just kind of a futuristic aspect, but it would be where possibly the cereal rye would be allowed to grow and then harvested, say for seed, and there would be a timing aspect of planting the soybean or corn and then being able, the timing is an aspect of when will that sprout, and getting the cereal rye harvested without harming that new growth and so forth. So that's where, I think that's the really interesting part, and where farming becomes much more of a science and so forth. But
so what is your cash crop?
Corn and soybeans.
Okay, corn, soy. That's what I was asking. So
Yep, I'm sorry.
No, that's
So-
right. So you're leaving that down though not as a nurse crop, but you're planting through it. You're doing a no-till.
Correct. Yes, they do no-till, so they do plant through it. It is terminated. One of my tenants terminates it, and then 10 days later, I believe it is, plants, and the other one allows it to continue, and it grows longer, plants, and then terminates in a different time frame before it's going to affect what has been planted.
Right. So are they terminating with Roundup? Or what are they terminating with? Do you know?
I honestly don't know exactly what is being terminated with, but it probably is at least a derivative or a similar aspect. So,
Right.
but yeah, that is still a part of the cover crop use, is that it is terminated, and so there is still a chemical, but with the cover crop on there, that intent, as long as there's not overuse of that chemical and it is applied appropriately as it's supposed to be, that with roots in the ground, that soil is staying there and those nutrients are staying there, and that those chemicals aren't leaching to streams or other places that we don't want them to be. because we have those roots in the
And then
ground.
they'll do a reseeding in like September or after they.
Yes, yes, in the fall. So, and depending on if it was soybeans or corn, if it's corn, we're going to fly it on so that it can get on earlier. And if it's soybeans, then it generally we're getting them out early enough that we can seed it in.
So you say
And
you're gonna fly, so it's a scatter, so, and you get a decent germination rate with a scatter, so?
it's better when it's seeded in. But if we wait till after the corn is harvested, then we don't have much growth time, especially if we're going to put something, it's not as big of a deal with cereal rye, but if we're going to put like the radishes or any of that, it's a little bigger deal of getting it on
Right.
earlier.
This brings up, I think, and I'm sorry.
No, I was just
Go ahead.
wondering about, so when you're harvesting your corn, that does not interrupt the root systems of your baby cover crops?
No, it does not.
I really appreciate the granular level of this conversation. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, no, you're fine. It does not disturb that at all. In fact, the first time that it was coming up, I was really worried because we saw it and then we had a hard, it was really cold or snow, but cereal rye is pretty hardy. It stays. So.
Yeah. And oats germinate at 32 degrees. So why do you choose cereal rye?
Easy access, just something that the people that are that are applying the cover crops, it's what they have been used to, it's what they have and they're set up to do. So, and since it was more popular and more readily used, my tenants were more okay using it, which is fine. I think that we have to start things at our own comfort level. And sometimes we can jump in the deep end and sometimes we need to walk in the shallow end and get there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for the dialogue. We're going to shift to Alicia and hear from Alicia's field and her production and how she works with soil health. And so, Alicia, I will go ahead and share screen your slides for you. Alicia, how does that sound? Good to go?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, here we are.
Awesome. So I am on a very small farm compared to everyone else. I have a 5-acre little hobby farm. This is kind of what the land looked like when we moved in. I was 8 months pregnant when we moved in. It was the end of 2019. And I just had experience with like home gardening. Not a lot of, like I had only done a few gardens like that were already started. So like coming here was a big move for me and just creating everything that we have now. We put in, I think it's 50 by 50 garden, and we have a trail that goes around the outside. We're kind of like a big rectangle. So at the top, we have elderberry, we have blackcaps, and 16 mulberry trees coming around the side of like the black and the white, different varieties. We put in 3 apple trees so far. We've got 10 plum trees. It's been a lot and it's been really fun. You can show the next one. So we did have to start from scratch. We did till up what we needed to, and I don't know, it's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but it's all clay and there's a lot of rock in there, and we had to spend a lot of hours pulling out the pieces of rock, and to amend the soil was quite a bit for us. It was a big task. Thankfully we had neighbors down the road. We got horse manure from them, and I don't, you can switch to the next one. I'm not sure if I have a picture. So, okay, yeah, you can see the quality of the soil there isn't great for our garden purposes. So we have a roadside food stand, which has been good for like excess produce. We primarily grow for our own family and friends. So what we had to do for this, dealing with this, we added in composted manure. We had some like a lot of grass clippings and like pulverized wood chips to kind of separate out the clay. That's our primary issue. We did add in a little bit of sand in one area as an experiment, but it really just made it worse. That was a lesson that we learned. So now we use raised beds. So we have this whole area was prepared for like in-ground gardening, and we used a mound system the first couple years. And now we have half raised beds and half like mounds for like melons and squashes and stuff like that. You can switch it. And so we added in some of our goat friends. We just have 3 little goats. Got Dash, this is baby Dash, she was a bottle baby. We also have 2 others, Stormy and Dot. And we keep them, I think there's another picture of it, but there's 40 by 40 pens that they're in. Yeah, so this is like their bed, like this is their room that they live in. And then they actually, if you remember Annie talking about, it's not good for them just to be in that one spot. So we have those panels, like the hog panels that you can see, those rotate and they go down our hill. So every couple days they switch, and then they also are in along the trail so that they have the bushes and the trees to go along the clear brush for us. They're just a great little team. And it's also really nice because it's really fun for the kids to have them. So they go out, the goats will stay near them, they'll play together, and they're getting all the access to the leaves, and the kids have a tree fort on the back of our hill, and goats have fun hanging around down there. But so really they're more pets than they are like farm. You can go back to the other picture. So we also have we do rain barrels. We fill up the rain barrels from our roof, and then we put them in larger totes and bring them out with the tractor, and we rotate out the totes for the garden. And it really helps kind of control the amount of water that's like on our, so we're on a weird ridge. And not only do we have a really big wind problem, which I think maybe the clay kind of helps our, like the products we have in the garden, because the root system is really stuck in, but we control the water that we have on our hill to kind of help with that compactness from the clay. And eventually we will be getting into something called keyline swales, which you learned about from a farm up north from Anathoth Community Farm in Luck, Wisconsin. And it's a system where you dig trenches along where you can see like your water goes. If you're watching in the winter or springtime, you can kind of see the flow of like the erosion happening, and you work along with that and make sure that you're diverting water to where you need it on your land. So that's gonna be a project for us coming up. Right now, we use our back hill as a sledding hill for our kids. So we're kind of splitting up, waiting maybe another 10 years to do that project. You can go forward a couple screens. So with the rotating of the goat pasture for the soil, you can, so the previous picture was really grazed down. This is kind of the stuff that's coming back. It's a little hard to tell with all the lamb's quarter in there, but we also have things like the clover. We use cover crop and let a neighboring farmer use some of our land in exchange for hay. We put in like clover, amaranth, winter wheat, which we actually cut by hand and use for our own family, or like if we do hay, then they'll bale it for us and then we leave it for our goats just to supplement. And we're seeing a bunch of things come back that, like we have mint, motherwort, muskmallow, marshmallow, goldenrod, sunflowers, aster, all the things that are good for like pollinators. And I think it's really helpful to have all that stuff coming back just with the grazing and getting like the goat manure kind of spread out. And then we also have a bunch of chickens that dig the free range. So it digs in the poop for us. You can switch to the next one. And this is a great horned owl that is one of our residents. And that's my cat approaching it. Not a super smart cat. But with all the improvements from the pollinator plants coming back and stuff, we've also seen the owl. We actually have this great horned owl and a nesting pair of eastern screech owls, which I think is pretty rare just because one of them is a predator, and we just have so much life on our little 5 acres that there's room for everybody. We have some turkey and a lot of bats, which we call night sparrows because my youngest is afraid of bats, so they're just night sparrows. We also have a bunch of woodpeckers, like the really big ones, I think pileated woodpeckers, and then the little, like the downy woodpeckers. We've got the 6-spotted tiger beetles that are kind of coming, and we're noticing a bunch of different things just by using the land. And so it was old farmland before we moved in, and the people who owned the house before us kept bees. So I don't think it was organic certified, but they definitely did not use any chemicals on the land. But it was great moving in, having that land prepared like that for us. We also do composting, compost piles. We use chicken manure from our coop, goat manure from the goat shed, and horse manure from the neighbor. We have to let those rest, of course. Chicken manure you have to let sit maybe 2 months. Goat manure 6 months for the garden. Not putting things on right away. Goes in a pile. The chickens help break it down, and then we have it's covered in black sheeting, but it's not like the pile is not plastic is not like on the pile. It's up like a roof, so that it still gets the heat, but then the chickens can still get under there and turn things over. And we have talked about using human urine, also something that we learned from that farm in Luck, which can be a safe source of like extra nitrogen. You have to make sure you mix it with 1 part water, or 8 parts water to 1 part urine, sorry. And making sure you keep your pee buckets separate from your water buckets. But there's just a lot that I feel like we have going on with our little bit of space. But I'm really happy that we have the opportunity to have all that stuff, but it's a really kind of a family project, I think. Just this is my little one with our black caps that we gather on our trail. Those are the next one, I think, with some of our raised beds. And you can kind of see, pictures blurry, but in the back, just I think there is some crop from the farmer that we let use that front field. But our dirt is getting a lot better in our raised beds that we mix in. I think that's all I have, Amy.
Question in the chat
Sure.
about your rain barrel. Yeah, Jackie's asking, what is the brand of the rain barrel that you use?
Sure. I don't think I know the brand. We actually got them from a brewery. So it's like a food grade, just 55-gallon drum.
Does anyone else?
I had a quick question. So are you adding anything else with the composting of the chicken manure and things? I'm gonna say, so that there's green, like maybe grass after it's been clipped, or just some other things. I have my chicken manure in a pile, and I actually put a thermometer in there, and it's like 170, 180 degrees. So it's really hot.
Yeah, it can get hot if you leave it like that. So We do put in grass clippings, pulverized wood chips. We do like eggshells that have been like crushed into powder from our
Right.
chickens. And we also put in like all of our own kitchen compost.
Right.
What really helped is we had a like a local cafe that did all organic food. And most of them from like local farms. And we used to bring them buckets, and every couple days they would fill the bucket, we'd pick it up and then bring it back. So it really helped kind of balance out the different levels of like. the
Yeah, that's where I think I'm at, is that my proportion of chicken manure is way outweighing my, the scraps from my vegetables or fruit or things that, because I'm a one person, so I'm not eating them. I eat a lot of that, but not enough. So, okay, thank you.
Question, Teresa. So, and thank you so much, Alicia. We're going to transition to some breakout rooms and sort of keep us rolling with our 12:30 end time. So we're going to create 4 breakout rooms. There'll be about 4 participants per room, and myself or Jean or Teresa or Annie or Alicia will be in a room with folks. And I'm going to drop one more time the questions that we're looking to explore in breakout rooms, which include: what is it that you need to do to get started, or next steps to create soil health? What soil health issues are folks most concerned about? And any co-hosts can copy and paste these. And what are folks inspired by? So I'm going to create these rooms right now. We'll come back together in about, I want to say, 7 or 8 minutes. So we have time to capture folks' feedback. And co-host, I have not assigned us to rooms, so we can just join as they form. So I'm going to open rooms now. And then co-hosts, who would like room 1, who would like room 2, who would like room 3, and Jean's already in room 4.
It doesn't matter to me. This is Annie.
Okay. Annie, do you want to jump into room 3? I'm just scrolling up my screen.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty.
Annie's
I'm
room
going
3.
there.
Right on. And then we'll
Okay.
wrap up in about 7 minutes to keep us on track.
Amy, do you want me to take 2 then?
Sure, that's great. Which
Okay.
leaves me with 1. Welcome back as folks are coming back in here. I'm going to honor our time. And as folks stream back into the center room, I will invite the co-hosts who are helping facilitate the breakout rooms once everyone's together to just do a round circle of some key points that you are hearing in your breakout room and perhaps drop that into the chat box. And co-hosts, if they don't get dropped in the chat box, that's okay. I'll be taking notes as well. Welcome everyone, welcome back. I know there's never enough time. There's never enough time, which is great because we are all engaged and interested in soil health. I'm gonna ask group leaders, i.e. the co-hosts in breakout rooms, to share some of the key points that you heard. And I'll actually model right now, and I'm gonna drop some in the chat box here. In my room, we talked about grazing and timing, rotational concerns, soil stability and erosion, invasives, and also key for folks working in community gardens and raised bed environments, pesticide and herbicide contaminated soil. So that is some of the highlights. So these were concerns and a little bit of, I'm gonna hand this over to Annie. Annie, if you'd like to share out some key highlights from your breakout room.
Well, I don't know if we have particularly key highlights because we weren't that chatty, but
Okay.
there were some questions about where to find free manure. I brought up about, did people have climate adaptation plans? Because that definitely involves soil. A couple people had some comments about their work and what they're doing. And one of the people was from a company that's really just interested in doing to see if they could have some new ideas about research and development. So thank
Thank you. And how about Theresa or Jean?
All right. I can go. Jean, I can go here. Hopefully I can summarize this, but just kind of more interested in managing crops, like after it's grown, not just marketing, but just kind of some full management of storage, some of those kinds of things, different other places to work with, like land and water conservation. One of our participants is working in the city in Detroit, and working with a food company, getting like a juice bar. And so getting their waste and composting and creating some compost there, kind of looking at what soil is best for certain crops. There's somebody looking to grow flax on, they had 10 by 10 plots and they were going to try 4 different types of flax to see what grew best to use for clothing. So just a whole host of things. And I think it brings a point, you know, there's plants we grow for lots of different purposes, not just consumption.
Totally. Thank you, Theresa. And then Alicia or Jean, I'm not sure if you were in the same room, but okay, so Jean.
Sure, we had a good discussion. We had a lot of experienced cover croppers and such in our discussion. So we talked about how hard the transition to organic is for farmers who are used to doing one kind of agriculture, and to change that whole skill base over to organic, and certainly regenerative practices help towards that. So it's kind of a journey. And so we spent some time talking about that. And one of the things that we ended on is soil testing and who does that and how do you get that accomplished. And I will say this is an unabashed advertisement by agreement with WFAN. I have a separate business that I offer workshops. And certainly Kathy Birch has endured one, and I don't see anybody else on right now who's, or Ruth Rabinowitz has participated too, where we can get granular, as Nanny's talking about, and really get into the details like soil testing and what's the company and how do you get it and what do they tell you and what does the results look like and how do you analyze those kind of things. So I have that as an opportunity. That's the end of my commercial because I am, I'll just paste my website in the chat, and anybody that really wants to get on the email list, you have to reach out to me. I'm not going to put you on as a matter of fact. So that's my commercial.
No, thank you, Jean. I have your website right here. If it's all right, I can just drop it in.
Okay.
So as we round this session out, and thanks for the feedback also, Nan, we're really looking to dig into what we heard here, questions that we heard, concerns, and things that folks want to learn more about. I'm going to share one last slide that has contact information for our panelists, as well as upcoming events, which might be relevant to you, depending on geographic, where you are in the world here. But while I pull that up, I invite folks to drop in the chat maybe one or two words that describe how you're feeling about your soil health journey right now. And I'm going to put folks' contact info up. Thanks to the panelists for being open for that. So Annie and Theresa and Alicia are up here for folks. And I can also drop this in the chat, which I will do right now for folks. There's that. So those are in the chat. And then I just wanted to point folks to, if you happen to live in Iowa, there is a Women's Woodland Stewardship Network. I wish I was in Iowa so I could go to this. It's in 2 days, March 23rd from 4 to 6:30 p.m. And some amazing Iowa landowners that work closely with WFAN, Jackie Armstrong, Martha McFarland, and Ruth Rabinowitz, who've been doing stellar work on their land, will be sharing their experiences. And I will drop that registration link in the chat box if anyone is in that area and interested in that. So, and we have one more WFAN event coming up soon that I'll share for folks. So I just dropped the registration link for the Woodland program going on in a couple days, March 23rd. And then we also have a Women Caring for the Land Learning Circle in southeastern Iowa. And it circulates around assessing the health of your soil. So that takes place Thursday, April 18th, 9:30 to 3 p.m. at the Prairie Woods Spirituality Center in Hiawatha, Iowa. And so WFAN is partnering with NRCS for this event. And so this is sweet. If you would like NRCS to create a land map of your farmland, please email Alyssa with your coordinates or address to your farmland. And so that's a wonderful resource. And again, this occurs April 18th, 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I will drop the registration link to that as well in the chat box. For folks who are interested in following our soil health program as we build out opportunities for folks to share stories and questions, please do visit Jean's website. And she's just an amazing resource for all things cover crops and soil health and land conservation. And we're really lucky that she's here And thank you so much for
Hey,
everyone. for showing
wait,
up.
Amy. I want to say one thing. There is one
Oh.
other WFAN event, and that's in Ohio, which maybe there's nobody from Ohio here. But that doesn't mean you can't come. But we're going to have Goat College on March the 29th from 1 to 4. And then on Thursday evening, we're going to have a meal, a lovely meal that's been paid for by WFAN, and some gifts for all of our visitors and women who are in agriculture, and focus on funding resources, talking about what it takes to be a mentor and a mentee, and how to sign up if you want to for the HOP program at WFAN, and link up with Nadia, our friend from Ukraine, who's working with women in ag there.
Annie, thank you. Is there a registration link that I can drop in the chat box for folks?
They just should send me an email, Annie@bluerockstation.com, and we have 4 more slots before we're full.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much.
no problem.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.